Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the African Aviators Webinar Series powered by Embraer. My name is John Howell. I'm the founder and CEO of AviaDev Africa. We are a platform dedicated to developing African aviation. And I'm so excited about today's event. This has been a lot of work in the making. I'm nearly as excited as I am about my football club, Manchester United, and their impending return today of Cristiano Ronaldo to the football pitch, but equally as excited, if not more so, than about this session. The first thing I want to say before we start is a massive thank you to our sponsors, Embraer, who have enabled us to put this session together and are demonstrating their support and belief in the future of the African aviation industry. Now, today is going to be a positive day. We're going to have positive conversations. Thank you, everybody, for joining. But before we start, we are also aware that today is an incredibly poignant day and a sad day for the aviation community and the global community at large, as it marks the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks in New York and across the USA. So I'm sure many of you actually on this webinar are too young to remember those, but you'll have seen the footage, especially over this week, and they changed our world and also the way our industry works forever. So our thoughts and prayers are with all of those affected, all those for all that time. So yeah, we wanted to start with that. Now, before I introduce our fellow panelists and we get into the main conversation, I would like to just quickly run you through the housekeeping for those of you joining us. We are live on Facebook on the African Aviation Group. We are also here on Zoom. This is a Zoom webinar. That means that if you are attending as an attendee, if you're watching, you will have access to use the chat function, but you will not be able to turn on your cameras or talk to us. That means that obviously we're not going to be interrupted and there's plenty of stuff to be said. We've collated your questions ahead of time anyway, but please do add your Q&A and we'll get to those over the coming hour or so. In terms of the format of the event, we're going to start with introducing the panel. Then we're going to move quickly into a questions and answers with the panelists, who are going to be pretty sharp with their answers so we can get through all your questions. We're going to pause in around about an hour's time to allow you to enter our live aviation quiz, which is great fun. And I'll be back on to talk you through how that all works at the appropriate time. We actually have prizes for the top 3 placed in the quiz, and you will see a live leaderboard as the quiz progresses. So finally, before I introduce my co-host for the session, I want to say that this series is the first in what is a long-term commitment from AviaDev, from Airspace Africa, and from the African Aviation Group. We are going to do this every month for the next 6 months, and the content is going to be driven by you, by our community. So after this session, we will be putting a poll out next week. What would you like to hear about next? Who would you like us to feature? And then we'll start working towards a date for the second session. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Derek Naseka. Derek is the founder and publisher of Airspace Africa. If you don't get the newsletter, get on his website and make sure you sign up and follow him on all the social media platforms. That is a dedicated online publication for African aviation and is a brilliant source of info. His work in the media encompasses both written and broadcast media. He has a recurring role as a commentator on CNBC Africa, many others as well. He's been on my podcast. He's been on many events with me as well. And he contributes as well to magazines and newspapers all across the continent. But added to this as well, Derek is also a qualified commercial pilot, and he's giving back by inspiring the next generation through his iFly Academy. iFly have won various awards and has been recognized through an ICAO publication for the next generation as a case study of how things should be done to get the next generation into the cockpit. And then alongside him, if Dozie would like to turn his camera on, is Chidosi Uzoezzi, who I know all of you know very well. He is very much a familiar face, voice, and commentator. And he is the founder of the African Aviation Group on Facebook, which is an incredible achievement that he's now got over 260,000 members of that group, and it's an incredibly active and fun group as well. So welcome, Dozie. And just to give him his little little sort of bio as well. He's an aviation analyst. He knows more than I've forgotten about aviation. He's a prolific content creator, as you all know. He's a newspaper columnist, and he's also an in-flight magazine contributor. So, Derek, I'm going to hand the floor to you, and you are going to introduce our first panelist, and then Dozie will introduce the other two panelists as well. So over to you, Derek. Take the floor.
Thank you so much, John. And you were very kind there with my bio. I appreciate that. And I first of all have to say I'm very excited about this series. It's the next generation is really something we're very passionate about, and we've done a lot of work over the last few years with various initiatives to try and bring through the next generation. But this webinar is really a first of its kind, so I'm very excited to see how things are going to unfold over the next few months. Introduce our first panelist, and there's no particular order. I'm just going to be a gentleman and go with the ladies first policy. So I'll introduce Amanda Kandawire-Khoza. She is a pilot who hails from the famous Soweto in Johannesburg. So Amanda has been flying until last year. She was flying for about 13 years, and she flew for various airlines, including SA Express, South African Airways, and the gigantic Emirates Airlines, where she flew Queen of the Skies, the Airbus A380. So she currently holds an airline transport pilot, of course. And over the years, she's been recognized, and she's received various accolades as a very inspirational figure in South Africa. She was part of the 100 brightest young minds in South Africa in 2014. And she was also the recipient of the CEO magazine's most influential woman in aviation in 2018-2019. And one of her amazing skills is digital illustration. And she's now going very high as an entrepreneur, where she's now the founder of Fly Like a Girl. This is a social enterprise, a company whose mission is to expose children to aviation and STEM through educational toys. She's the founder of Layover Art as well, an art deco company that designs and sells her art prints and art curated products, and handmade earrings brand. So I actually advise all of you to follow Amanda on social media and check out some of this amazing work that she's doing. Welcome, Amanda. We are very happy to have you.
Thanks so much, Derek.
All right, hello.
Over to you, Dozie, to introduce our next guest.
Good afternoon, everyone from Lagos. My name is Chidosi Uzoezzi. You know me as already as Dozie, which is fine. Before I introduce the rest of the guests, I would love to say that I disagree with Derek that A380 is the queen of the skies. Not when the Boeing 747 is there. But that's not taking anything away from Amanda. She's been doing a great job flying the A380, which is the largest commercial passenger aircraft in the whole world. Well, my first guest, the rest of the guests from my first guest is Captain Haig. Anyonyi. I hope I haven't mutilated your name. He has an intimidating CV. He's a typewriting instructor and a typewriting examiner at KQ, which by no means is a mean feat. He's been with KQ for the past 15 years, but before he joined KQ, he had flown with several airlines, including United Nations, where he flew for missions in Somalia and Sudan. Since joining KQ, he has been typefated on several aircraft types, including the almighty Boeing 777, Boeing 767, Boeing 737, both classic and NG, and of course, Embraer, our darling aircraft, as far as today is concerned. Apart from flying, he's also very interested in safety and quality management. Currently, he's a flight quality management flight data monitoring officer at Kenya Airways. There are so many other things Haig is. In the course of this program, I'm going to discuss all of those. First of all, welcome to the program, Captain Haig.
Thank you, Chidozie. I'm glad to be here, and it's good to see everyone here. Thanks.
How is Kenya doing today?
Say again?
How is Kenya doing today?
Kenya is great. It's a cloudy day. We're expecting sun in August, but we are here contending with the cold weather.
All right, welcome to the program, Captain Haig.
Thank you.
All right, last but not least is the Nuga Pavali, a very popular face in the African Aviation group. He's one of the most committed and most engaging members in the group. Nuga is an aspiring pilot from Nigeria. He has always wanted to be a pilot since he was a child. And his ultimate goal is to be a Boeing 777 captain and an instructor, which is going to be very interesting. Interestingly, Nuga is currently pursuing his degree, a law degree in one of the Nigerian universities, which is a very interesting twist in his aviation story. We are going to discover more as we go on in this program. He helps to be, Nuga hopes to kickstart his aviation career, first of all, become a flight dispatcher, and then proceed to a flight school to become a pilot. So, Nuga, welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm doing great.
All right, please don't go anywhere because I'm trying. I want to kickstart this program with you because your questions will set, your answers will set the tone for this webinar, which is the very first edition of our Aviators Webinar Series, which will be coming in the next 6 months. So I would like to ask you, why do you want to be a pilot even after obtaining a law degree? I mean, law degree is one of the most prestigious degrees in the whole world. I mean, it's in the league, in the same league with medical degree, perhaps engineering degrees. Why do you want to become a pilot even after becoming a lawyer? What drives your passion for aviation? I'd like to know, Nuga.
Okay. Once again, good afternoon. Thank you for having me on this webinar. First of all, I would like to say I've had this passion to fly since I was a little child. So growing up through school, when I was in primary school, there's this aircraft that usually flies over us. Then I didn't know the name of the aircraft, but then as I developed in the field, gained knowledge, I remember I just identified the aircraft. It's actually a Cessna 208 Grand Caravan. So I've always wanted to have a feeling of what it feels like to be controlling that that bird, that thing going up there. I've always wanted that since I was young. And growing up and went to school, I ended up in art class, and because I didn't perform very well in mathematics in my junior secondary school, so I was moved to the art class, and that's how I finished my secondary school as an art student. So I moved to read law based on my parents' suggestion. They didn't actually support the aviation dream. So it was based on their volition that I had to go on to read law. But I felt it's also has an advantage because it gives me an upper hand having a degree before going into the aviation industry. So I felt, okay, once I'm done with that, I'm going to pursue my lifelong dream, my childhood dream.
All right, I'm coming to follow up question, Nuga. Obviously, you have always had passion for the aviation industry. Once you eventually become a pilot, let me ask you, what are the challenges you're currently facing or facing so far in your quest to becoming a pilot? What are the challenges you're facing, perhaps in terms of information, funding, or whatever? Just tell us, because there are so many other people like you out there. You're only representing well. There are thousands and millions of aspiring pilots, even in Africa. So what are the challenges you are facing? You talk to your friends and neighbors and colleagues. What are they telling you? What are the challenges aspiring African aviators are facing? Give us these challenges with your own experience in view.
Yes, my own experience. Challenges I faced are basically two challenges. I didn't really get a challenge regarding information. The main challenges I had were from support from family initially, and financial challenge actually. I didn't really get the support initially from my parents, but eventually they're gradually turning to support me now. Then the financial challenge. Everybody knows the cost of training for pilots is very, very high, and that's what I believe that's one of the main things that scared my parents from deciding to support the dream, because they feel it's very expensive, and they feel I should go and pick up a career in law, it's better. So I think these are the main challenges, especially the financing, the money to get the money for that. Yeah.
I'll come back to you with further questions. I'll stop you there and go to Captain Haig. I'm coming back to you with further questions, but let me go to Captain Haig. Hello, Captain Haig.
Hi, Dozie, how are you?
All right, I'm good. You had Nuga relate the challenges they're having as aspiring African aviators. A couple of months ago, we did a poll in the group on Facebook. We asked them what the most important factors that stop people from having their dreams in the aviation industry. They listed five of them. I'll leave that in this importance in order of importance. They said one is lack of funding. 2 is poor training facilities. 3 is lack of information, like Nuga pointed out. 4 is inadequate training facilities, and 1 is lack of parental consent. Most pointed that out. Do you agree with these 5 points being the most important challenges that face aspiring African aviators? Captain Haig.
I do agree, because based on the poll, it's based on what everyone thinks or perceives it to be. So looking at number 1, which is funding, and especially in Kenya, talking to aspiring aviators, it's something that we see that's a common theme amongst most of them. It's become very expensive to train to become a pilot, whether in Kenya or abroad, and it's becoming more and more expensive as aircrafts become more complex. So funding, for me, would rank number 1. Secondly would be training facilities. So I do agree that we do have a long way to go in the training space in terms of facilities, compared to other pilots in the world. So for example, you'd find not many African schools that offer aviation have simulators, for example. So simulators would drive the cost of flying further downwards, because it's cheaper to fly on the ground than to fly in the air. Lack of information, I don't necessarily agree with, because in this digital age, especially looking at YouTube, looking at Facebook, there's a lot of information that is out there that emerging pilots could access. So as long as you are able to have access to the internet, then you should be okay. So those for me would rank as the top 3 that are facing African aviators or aspiring African aviators.
All right, I'll come back with you with more questions, Captain Haig, but let me go to Amanda before I hand over the floor to my co-pilot, Derek. Amanda, are you there for me?
Yes, I'm there.
Right, Amanda, welcome to the program. I'm glad to see you face to face today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to meet you face to face too.
Right, a couple of days ago, someone made a comment in the group and said, "Wow, you are so young and you have achieved so much in the industry." And I want to agree with the person. You are so young and you have achieved so much in the industry. You've flown for several years. Not just not just one of the finest pilots in Africa. You're also one of the most skilled and most experienced. Having flown for years and having flown for Airspace, African Airways, and the Emirates, which is the largest international airline in the world, and it has the largest fleet of A380 in the world, which you have flown, which is a great feat. Not many African pilots, both male and female, fly this aircraft. So you have achieved so much in your life as a pilot. For many pilots are jealous of you. Apart from being a pilot, you're also an entrepreneur, a digital illustrator, and a public speaker. So your CV is also intimidating, but let's go back to the basics. How did it all start for you? At what point in your life did you know you wanted to become a pilot? And tell us, what were the early signs that you wanted to become a pilot, Amanda?
So I was fortunate where I got exposed to aviation at a very early age. So the first time that I went flying was when I was 5. So My mom's side of the family stays on a different part of South Africa, which is normally about a 9-hour drive from where I grew up. And usually I'd go down with the bus with my parents, but this one particular trip, they couldn't come with me. And the safest way to get a 5-year-old across a 9-hour journey was by flight. So that first flight I did was enough for me to be like, this is what I want to do when I grow up. So I spent my whole childhood singing the same song, and I started flying straight after high school.
Okay, tell us, Amanda, obviously being a pilot in the world, in Africa in particular, is not, it comes with many challenges, especially for women, for the girl child. What were your challenges as a girl child, as a young pilot? Did your parents support you? Did your family support you? Did you have any challenges in flight school as a girl child, as a female student pilot? Were you intimidated? What was the relationship you had with your male colleagues in the flight school? Tell us, Amanda.
Well, the first issue as a girl child is just the issue of exposure. I was fortunate enough to get exposed when I did, but growing up and you realize how there's so many things that people don't know about aviation. And I mean, at the time, information about it was also scarce, especially if you didn't know anyone that was flying or anyone that was in the industry. So that was always the biggest challenge, where even though I knew that I wanted to be a pilot when I grew up, at the time, I didn't know what I was going to fly on, where I was going to train. I only learned all of this later on in high school, that pilots go to a flying school and you don't go to university to become a pilot. So information like that, luckily now, is easily available thanks to the internet and how information is now available online. But the biggest challenge for me, once I did join flight school, was imposter syndrome, because at the flight school that I was at, I was the only female there. So when you go into a space like that, you start questioning so many things about yourself, and you start wondering if this is even for you, especially when you're in a space where nobody looks like you. But sometimes, you know, you have to have the conversation with yourself, and you sit down and you realize that we're all different. Everyone is coming in from a different background, and some people may have been exposed previously to aviation because of other factors, and they have family members that may be in the industry, but it doesn't stop you from wanting to run your own race.
With another question. Was there any point in time in your career, especially in France, that you thought of perhaps got discouraged and thought of quitting? Because these are the hear that student pilots, they kill themselves, they quit because of this community suicide, because of perhaps depression. Were you at some point in school depressed or even discouraged?
So luckily I was never depressed, but the biggest discouragement that I had was the lack of funding. So like many people, I didn't initially have the money to do the whole course. My parents were able to apply for a bank loan, and that was enough to just get me started. But when the money does run out, it's very discouraging, because no money means you don't get to fly. And just to have the mental strength to keep yourself going when the thing that you want, that feels as though the finish line keeps moving, that's always the hard part. So I understand a lot of people that are frustrated by the finances itself, because it's a big hindrance in you trying to achieve your dream. So for me, that was one of the biggest challenges, is just having enough money to finish.
All right, thank you for your generous answer, Amanda. My takeaway point is that from Amanda to Captain Haig to Nuga, the most important challenge facing African aviators is lack of funding. With that, I will hand over the floor to my co-pilot, Derek. Derek, are you there? About to you now.
I'm right here, Chidozie. I have control.
Dozie, you're supposed to say you have control.
Yeah. Very interesting insights there from.
I'm one of my co-pilots today.
I think we need to take doses through a CRM course.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Thank you so much. And I really thought the contributions were very insightful from all the three speakers who were before, and the issue of information and all the different challenges. I think we all share these challenges, but I just want to follow up exactly from where Amanda stopped on the issue of finances, which I'm sure is the single biggest issue out there, and it's everyone's hardest nut to crack. And I'm just going to ask you, Amanda, again, yourself, since you opened this door. you know, most of the people watching right now are looking at the screen and saying, can you give us what is the solution to this problem? And this is one of the most popular questions that we get out there, especially as people in the aviation industry. I'm looking for funding. Where can I get funding? Are there any hacks? You know, I come from a country where there's no funding structure for pilots. I know that most countries in Africa do not offer any specific funding for aviators. I know in South Africa, there's a few bursary programs out there, and even then they're still limited. And as far as I'm concerned, they seem to still not solve the specific problem of pulling the most desperate people and getting them into the industry. What hacks are there? Are there any initiatives, any programs? Is there something that you have to share for our audience and for the young people out there with regards to funding?
I think at the moment, one of the biggest hacks is trying to have your ear to the ground, because I live in a country where bursaries are available, but the information is not publicly announced that they are available. So you may find that certain people know about it. So you come to a point where who you know is important, but what you know is important too. So in terms of organizations, COVID has made things a little difficult at the moment because the people that were previously giving out bursaries, things have come to a halt. But in South Africa, we have a company called TITA, and they give out bursaries. Internationally, there's an organization called Women Aviation International. They give out scholarships every single year. And no, they are not just for women. So do check that website out. I think it's wai.org. But I know it's never going to be enough. I think it's one of those issues that we are going to have for a long time to come, purely because flying does get more expensive each year. But people also then have to find ways to get creative about the things that they're trying to do. I mean, I know in South Africa, where approach your local government, approach your local municipality, they also give out bursaries that aren't always advertised. But I think people mustn't also be afraid of doing other things to earn the money in order for them to fly. Because a lot of times people will say to me, I don't have funding. What am I supposed to do? Well, I know so many pilots that did other jobs in order for them to build up the funding in order to have the money to go to flying school. So yes, it means your journey is longer, but just because you're flexible about your method, it doesn't mean that your goal is not going to be attainable. It just might take a little longer, but I definitely think there's ways for people to work around the funding issue. The rest of us did.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think when it comes to piloting, you have to really be able to go that extra mile and take some of these unconventional routes into solving the problem. But I think what you said as well is very important. There is a lot of information out there that is not apparent to people, and people really need to dig. This is the information age. So I did something about the WAI International. Even I myself thought they only give funding to women. So that's something new for the guys out there to learn of as well, and perhaps can go check that out. And now to move on, Captain Haig, I've got a curious question with regards to training, and especially since you're in the training environment, and this is for flight schools. I know some of the people who are watching this right now have not yet perhaps figured out funding, but down the road, when that time comes, and perhaps those who are already at that point and they're looking for options, how do you choose a flight school? You know, I came to South Africa from Uganda, and I simply went to a flight school that was closest to my relatives in South Africa. But when you look around the various flight schools, they're all very different. They charge different fees. But at the end of the day, when you look around, these flight schools are flying pretty much the same aircraft, Cessna 172s, 150s, and the Pipers. They all seem to be the same. It suggests to me that I mean, if you're going into these different schools, what does the price matter? What makes the difference between one flight school and another? And then at the end of the day, you're all still getting the same license. So How did you come around to that choice?
Thanks for that question. I'm a safety man, I'm a safety practitioner, and I think for me, safety is the biggest consideration when you're looking for flight school. There's no need starting a school that, for example, does not have a safety record to match, and you end up having an accident further down the road or not fulfilling your career. So safety for me is usually a very important aspect that you need to ensure that in your research, in your conversations with the school or your friends who've gone ahead, that the school has a good safety record. Secondly is we as African aviators need to network a bit more. We need to locate people who've gone ahead. I can call them mentors. And these people really guide what kind of schools you need to look out for. You could ask Amanda, please accompany me to a certain flight school. Amanda will ask the right questions. She'll be able to, put everything in perspective for you in terms of whether this is the right fit for you. And that way, then, of course, you end up gauging your options. One aspect, again, is when we look at flight schools, and I've taken a few of my mentors to flight schools, is what facilities do they have? What are they going to offer? This starts really with your goal. Do you want to become an airline pilot? Do you want to become a hobby pilot? And different schools will cater for different aspects of what you want to do. So if you want to move to the airline, for example, like Amanda, then you need to find a school that focuses on molding you as an airline pilot, has the facilities to match an airline environment. Under safety, we also do have something like aircraft maintenance. Where are the aircrafts maintained? Because you will find that, of course, as a person, you need to be safe. So you also need to find out how are the aircrafts in this school maintained. One of the biggest ones is the personnel. So you're going to be taught flying. You're going to have an instructor. And it's also very important to factor in the credentials of the teaching staff at that particular school. Are they experienced enough to get you where you're going? Or have they just finished their private pilot's license and they're teaching you how to fly? So it's very important that the credentials of the teaching staff at that particular school is considered. Lastly, I would think about what curriculum they're using. I'd watch out for a school where I joined today and tomorrow I'm in an aircraft. Looking at aviation, you have to really put a lot of technical theory into your flying. You need to ensure that before you get into an aircraft, you actually know what you're doing, you know your surroundings, you know your technical knowledge to match the flying skill that you're trying to build. So it's very important that the school you choose has a very definite training curriculum and methodology, and they can point from day one, these are your milestones, this is how you'll progress through the course, this is how much it will cost, and you'll be done in X number of months or X number of years. So it's very important that those are some of the factors that you look at when you're choosing a flight school.
Yeah, very important insights there from a safety perspective. And there's so many of these kinds of schools that have so many red flags, to be honest with you. But there's so many schools that have been around for a very long time, and that's a good place to start. Usually, if you've been around for a while, then you're definitely doing something right. But I wanted to ask you from that safety perspective, is there a specific way of finding out what the safety record is of a particular flying school?
If aviation is regulated and heavily regulated, and all schools are required by law to report all accidents or incidents within that particular space. So the regulator is a good place to go. You can go and ask and get information how many accidents has a certain school had, and of course the regulator, depending on who it is there. If you go to the safety department of the regulator, they should be able to give you statistics, should be able to give you data to support your theory. In Kenya, for example, the AAIB, which is the Accident Investigation Bureau, has all the incidents that have happened within Kenya under their website. So you can go and just go through the list and check were these flying schools, because they will list based on the investigations that they've done, what exactly happened. So the information is out there. It's not a secret when especially an aircraft incident happens. So it's very easy to get the data required to make that safety decision.
Thank you very much for that, Captain Haig. I can see Chidozie looks like he's got a burning question there. I'll let him take the reins now. You have control, Chidozie.
I have control, co-pilot Derek. Right,
well done.
Well done.
Since we are on flight school and choice of flight school, I might as well ask you this burning question about choosing flight schools. Traditionally, the most popular path to becoming a pilot is going to a flight school. These private schools are usually private and usually very, very expensive, which is usually beyond the reach of the most aspiring pilots in Africa, even outside Africa. Now, tell us, what are the other various paths available for aspiring African pilots, apart from going through a private school, which is very expensive? Are there other paths available for these aspiring pilots, perhaps going through the military or going through a private tutor or something like that, Captain Haig?
Thanks, Dozie. I've been training on the Embraer for maybe about 8 years now, and most of my students were never initially pilots. Like Amanda said, there are different paths to take to get there. I have doctors, I have dentists, I have dispatchers, I have cabin crew. So when you look at the journey towards getting to being a pilot, then you really have to chart your way. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and you really have to walk that journey. You said one important area, which is join the military. Unfortunately, usually it's not a very clear path because, for example, in Kenya, you'd have to go and run around a field or a forest to actually get selected to join the military. So that's a bit complex. I think another way you can do
It sounds easier than looking for $500,000 rand.
Yes, you probably get lucky with the money, looking for the money or getting a loan. But I think it's really charting your way if you're able to get some form of employment, and just slowly make your way towards a private pilot's license. That opens up an avenue like flight instruction. So a lot of people will build their hours using flight instruction or through flight instruction and be able to get their way to being a commercial pilot and eventually fly for a major airline.
All right, Captain Haig, just be with me. One more before I go over to Amanda. Why do airlines everywhere, especially in Africa, why do they insist that fresh pilots must have a certain number of hours to be considered to be employed? This is actually very discouraging, because find out that sometimes you see a fresh pilot who has graduated from flight school, he sits at home for 6 months, 1 year, sometimes 2 years. He's not employed because he doesn't have enough flight hours. Why do airlines insist on having a certain number of flight hours? And how can these pilots build these hours? Captain Haig.
So Dozie, if I was to ask you, if you had a choice of being operated by a student surgeon or an experienced surgeon, what would you choose?
I'm going to interview you, Captain.
So I think it's a thing about perception. It may not be necessarily be true, but I think when you come to the airline, it's all about safety, safety, safety. Everything we do is safety related. So it is believed that a person who has a higher number of hours is said to have a stronger foundation of aeronautical knowledge and experience and skill. So that person is deemed to be a safer pilot. This is not necessarily true, as we've seen throughout my training experience, but it is all about safety. Secondly, we also have to remember that airlines are not training schools. Airlines want to work with people who already have a certain level of understanding, certain level of skill, certain level of aptitude, so that we are able to train and mold you as fast as possible. So we do have training.
Why don't most African airlines have cadet programs like we have in Europe and America?
Dozie, I think cadet programs are actually there. If you look at South Africa, if you look at Kenya, for example, the airline does have a cadet program, which I would dare say 60% of all pilots in Kenya have passed through a cadet program. I'm not sure about SAA, what the statistics are, but there are a lot of cadet programs out there to be able to get pilots who would not necessarily afford flying to get to that path of joining the airline. We also have to remember that a few years back in 2009, there was a crash in Buffalo, an airline called Colgan. And because of this accident, when the investigation was complete, it was mandated by the FAA that all pilots who are going to join an airline must have 1,500 hours. Now, this model, of course, has been replicated across the world, and that's the standard to join an airline. So it's really more of having a standard across that airline space to be able to ensure that we are always safe, and safe.
All right, thank you so much, Captain Haig, for your generous answers. I'm going over to Amanda before I get over to Nuga for the last question. Amanda, are you ready for me?
I'm ready.
Right, Amanda. Coincidentally, today is the 20th anniversary of 9/11 attack on the US. That attack was, in many ways, an attack on the global aviation industry, because after that attack, many airlines grounded their aircraft, which meant that they stopped flying. Crews were retrenched, including pilots and cabin crew. They were at home for months and years doing nothing. 20 years later, here we are with COVID-19 pandemic, and something has repeated itself again. Pilots have been retrenched. They are at home doing nothing, praying and hoping they get a call back. And these callbacks don't come always. And they are at home because they have nothing to fall back on. Apart from flying aircraft, most pilots don't know how to do anything else. They don't have interest in anything else. They don't have skill in anything else. They don't have business in any other industry. They just fly aircraft from one place to the other. You understand? We hear that these pilots they're selling pizza, they're delivering meals, they are selling burgers at restaurants because they have nothing else to fall back on. Now, my question is this. Do you recommend that aspiring pilots should get a degree in other discipline, perhaps engineering, perhaps law, perhaps consulting, before they proceed to flight school to pursue their aviation dreams? Just like our aspiring pilot on the hot seat today, Nuga, he's doing a law degree. If there's a problem in the future, if he leaves the cockpit, he can always fall back to his law degree and make a living for himself. Look at you. You don't just fly airplane. You are an entrepreneur. You are a businesswoman. I can say that. So even if you don't fly in the next 6 months or 1 year, you won't go hungry, because there's something else that gives you money, puts food on your table, and puts money in your pocket. Most pilots don't have these skills. So do you recommend that aspiring pilots should get a degree in anything else, anywhere else, before proceeding to flight school, so that they don't get caught up in the because whether we like it or not, there will always be attacks, there will be COVID-19. What if there's COVID-20 or COVID-22 or COVID-25? So advice as foreign pilots, what is your honest opinion about this, Amanda?
Well, firstly, I don't think it's fair to base a world tragedy as the reason why someone should study something else. If you want to study something else, it must be because it's in line with what it is that you want to do, whether in the aviation industry or something else. Because even before the pandemic, even before 9/11, flying was always a fragile career because it's something that depends on our medical. So we all know for as long as you have your medical, you can fly. But if you lose your medical, you can't fly. So then the onus falls on you to then think, okay, if I'm not doing this, is there another skill that I possess in order to do something else? But I don't think a pandemic is reason enough for someone to go and say, I need to study something else, because the something else has to be something that you intend on using, because we don't tell other industries to go have a fallback career. You don't tell an engineer to have a fallback career. You don't tell a doctor to have a fallback career. A pilot is a specialized career, yes. But as we've seen, a pandemic is something that is hopefully a once in a lifetime thing. So from my perspective, if someone is going to choose to study something else, they must choose to study it because it's in line with what they want to do later in life. There's no point in me getting an engineering degree in the event that a pandemic happens and I need to have something to do while the pandemic is happening. Because as you've seen, we're speaking about pilots now, but aviation has been affected as a whole. So aviation has been affecting engineers, it's affected flight attendants, it's even affected HR departments and aviation industries. So I don't think it's right to say that people need to do things so that they have a fallback on in the event that something this tragic happens again. But education is never a waste. If you feel that there's a skill that you can use outside of aviation, pursue it. If there's something that you want to do that you feel will benefit you later in life, whether you want to become a training captain later on or a managing director of flight operations, then study those things so that it's in line with the vision that you want to have for your career later on. But for me, I can't sit here and say because of the pandemic, people should study something else. People should study something else because they want to do something in addition to flying. That's my stance in the whole thing.
All right, thank you so much, Amanda. That was very generous of you. My last question to Nuga.
Chidozie,
Yes,
can I please just follow that up with a question?
Okay.
And I think I'm just going to move it and ask Captain Haig because it's very related to what you guys have been speaking about. I just have a different perspective on this, because I feel over the years, the commercial air transport industry, the cockpit, the modern cockpit has evolved over the years. So the cockpit is very different from what it was 30 years ago. It's more automated. As you said earlier, Captain Haig, it's more complicated. Yeah, but the training environment has not changed very much over the last 30, I don't know how many years that you can count. Training is very much the same, even at ab initio level. Yeah, and I have noticed as well in many of the schools, especially the elite schools like in the United States, you have to do some kind of degree as a part of your flying course. Are there any particular skills right now that are kind of attributed to that one needs in order to be ready for the modern cockpit? Because I think it's also a fact, especially we're talking about number of hours that are now required by pilots is now moving farther and farther away from being airline ready. Is there any form of skilling? And that's where these degrees come in that you're talking about, not necessarily as a fallback. Is there any kind of skill or any form of skilling that you can give yourself even before you get into a flight school? And for people who are looking to get into flying down the road, is there any way that they can prepare themselves in terms of skilling themselves and getting ready for the modern cockpit, even before getting into flight school?
Sure.
Thanks for that question. And I think it's very important that you brought it out because the modern cockpit is quickly evolving and we're not evolving as fast in the training space. But I'll just give you an example. A few months back, we do have a program where enthusiasts can come to the flight simulator and get a chance to fly the simulator for 30 minutes with motion. And so I get in the simulator with a 9-year-old boy. In my head, I'm like, he's 9, so I guess there's not much he'll do. But this young man amazes me, and he was able to fly even better than all the adults had seen for the last 2 weeks. And, you know, speaking to him thereafter, he's very interested in simulation. Yeah, so he's at home, he has a flight simulator, and he's actually better able to get the skills, the aptitude, the scanning that even a new entrant or someone with a PPL would not have. So I think with the technology that we have now, and which is different from then when I guess Amanda and I were in flying school, there's a lot of technology and a lot of information that has evolved. There's a lot out there that a person looking to get into aviation is able to digest. There's YouTube, there's all the material out there. So I think there's a lot you can do even before getting into aviation that can springboard you into the career with a much better outlook. I'll give an example. So people in university would or are assumed to have a better reading culture than most people. It's not necessarily true, but again, it's one of those assumptions that we have, and you'll find a lot of airlines will insist, especially American Airlines, that you must have a degree for you to get a commercial job. But are we actually, even as African aviators, getting that reading culture to be able to propel yourself? As an airline pilot, Amanda and I will go through 3 to 4 exams a year, 2 in the simulator, 2 on the aircraft. And this is for the entire period of your career. So there's that aspect of, as African aviators, are we developing a sufficient reading culture that will be able to propel you when you get into commercial aviation? It's very different from flying school when you fly in a charter environment and then eventually join an airline. You'll find that it's very varied. The equipment that you're flying is very different. So I think as African airlines, we really need to up our game. We need to really develop ourselves, our confidence. Our reading culture is something that is very important when you want to get into aviation.
Thank you so much for that answer. Chidozie, sorry I interrupted you. Please proceed with the...
Okay, my very last question to our aspiring pilot on the panel today, Nuga Pavali from Nigeria. Nuga, if you're there, if you can hear me, I'd like to ask you. Can you hear me, Nuga?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Right. What do you think? Apparently, there are many challenges that aspiring African aviators everywhere in Africa face. What do you think the government can do? What are the governments of Nigeria or Africa, whatever they are? What do you think they can do to help these aspiring aviators achieve their dreams? If you want to become the governor of your state tomorrow, or the president of Nigeria tomorrow, what can you do to help aspiring aviators achieve their dreams? Because there are so many of them out there looking for people to help them achieve their dreams. Nuga.
Yes, I think what needs to be done, the government needs to take a cue from the government of Ethiopia. We know Ethiopian Airlines is like the biggest airline in Africa, and they have the Ethiopian Airlines Aviation Training School, where they run courses in piloting, flight attendants, course, flight dispatch. So if African governments, countries can start up something like that, let's say if they float a national carrier, or even if they don't have a national carrier, they can have a national aviation training organization where citizens that are interested in going into aviation can apply to those institutions and train at a subsidized rates. And after that, they get employed as cadets, as pilots, cadets, pilots, and also flight attendants or other ground operation staff in the airline. It would really go a long way to help the aspiring pilots and flight attendants, engineers, and other fields.
Right. One last question is personal. Why you said you want to ultimately become a captain on the Boeing 777?
Yes.
We know that today is Embraer Day, so forgive me for mentioning Boeing 777 on this platform. Why do you want to go for that aircraft? Don't you have a special place in your heart? Why 777 and not any other aircraft type?
Okay. I fell in love with the 777 because of the basically the power of the aircraft. You know, it has the largest and the most powerful jet engine in civil aviation among all aircraft. So I love that the aura of the aircraft. When you just see that, the sheer size of the engines is so impressive, and I just feel I would like to be in control of that aircraft. That's what made it so dear to me.
Right, thank you, Nuga, for your generous answers. It's been glad having you on this panel. Before I hand over a control to Derek, let me go to Captain Haig. Just 1 minute, Captain Haig. 1 minute, please. Hello, Captain Haig. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Captain, you've flown many aircraft, including 777, 767, 737, and the Embraer 190, 195, or 170. Tell us something about Embraer 170, 190, or something about Embraer in general. What are the beautiful things we should about Embraer aircraft? Tell us, please.
I love the 777, just like Nuga. It's a gentleman's aircraft, and it's one of the most stable aircraft I've flown. However, when I flew the Embraer, it's very different in terms of ergonomics. If you look at the control yoke, it's like a bicycle, and of course they say that that's the best control column that there is out there. So it's a very agile aircraft. It's very forgiving. It's fly by wire, so it's very simple to fly. The methodology or the thought that Embraer put into the aircraft is I think superb. So even from students who transition from a smaller aircraft, it's an aircraft that they're easily adaptable to. The 170 is slightly shorter and smaller, but we used to fly the 170 and the 190 as a common fleet, and it's very easy to fly. So it's a brilliant aircraft. Right. The E2 even better.
Now, before I hand over the control to John Howell for the Q&A from the audience, one last question, Captain Haig. Do you suggest that more African pilots should get separated on the Embraer aircraft?
I'm not sure that's a fair question to ask, but if they do have the opportunities to do so, then that would be welcome. It also depends on how many Embraers we have. I think South Africa has the most Embraers in Africa.
You're obviously not biased.
I'm not biased, but Embraer has a very big presence in Africa. So I do believe a lot of pilots should be rated on the Embraer in Africa.
Right. Thank you, Captain Haig, for your generous answers. Derek, do you have control, or should I hand over control to John for Q&A from the audience?
Yeah, I thought it'd be good to come in because we've had loads of really, really great questions. And we did promise, obviously you had some, and I think you've answered a lot of them actually. And the panel's been incredible just sitting here and watching it. I just wanted to make a bit of a point because there's been some good conversations about cadet programs and the issues behind airlines not actually investing in those. And of course, you know, I was using an analogy of sort of a football team or any sports team that either decides to invest in its youth system and bring in a child at 10 years old and train them and hope that one day they'll play in the first team, or you could adopt a different approach, which is more modern in football terms, definitely, of just buying in success and buying the best player in the world, putting them in your team. The problem with that is unless you've got an unlimited supply of money, which we know African Airlines don't, that's just not feasible to do that long term, because it's just going to cost you so much money. And we've had questions about why do foreign pilots get paid more than African pilots. You know, we do have to also be aware that African pilots leave Africa too. Amanda flew for Emirates, you know, and why wouldn't you? They've got the 380, there's great opportunities. And I know that's been an issue for airlines. They say, hey, we have a cadet program, we bring people through, and then they leave for the bright lights of the US or the Middle East or the Far East. And that's where the money is, where the prestige is, where maybe security is. They want to take their family, whatever it may be. So we have a big challenge there. And the other thing, just to Nuga's point on Ethiopia, because I've got firsthand experience. I've been around the training center down there, and it is incredible. The thing to say is you are slightly fortunate if you are an Ethiopian, because you have a very strong national carrier that's going to need to employ people, and they have a very Ethiopia first recruitment policy. So you can go and pay your money and go and train in Ethiopia, but at the end of it, yes, you get your qualification, but you're going to be at the back of the queue if you're not an Ethiopian, which is fair enough. Again, they're going to employ the people that they employ. And it's amazing to note, I don't know how many people know, but Ethiopian didn't make one redundancy during the whole of the COVID pandemic. They kept everybody employed, which is just incredible. And that's a bit of a side point. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up before I actually get to the question that's been submitted is the thing that frustrates me the most, and I think all of us, we've talked about money, and we know how hard it is just to get qualified. What's even more frustrating from me, which I see, is that the qualified students go back to their country and they are preyed on for their passion. So an airline or an airport might say, hey, come and do an internship. Well, you're qualified. You should be getting paid now. You should be doing a job. And what I see that governments and airlines and airports are actually using these people who are qualified as free labor for a period of time. They're not paying them. They're giving them experience, but these people have invested in their future, but their own countries are not investing in those students. So I want to see more of that. And the question is, and this is where I think the big question, we have a question from Alfred, and he's addressed it to us. He said, what are groups and organizations like African Aviators Group, Airspace Africa, AviaDev, what are we doing to reduce the cost of training and bringing the industry up to par like it is elsewhere in the world? And that's the question. Is we've talked about the money. We've talked about individuals having the money, but what is the structure on a Pan-African basis, and who should have the responsibility for developing the next generation of aviators? Should it be the individual governments, or should we be looking to the African Union? Where do we go? Is it the World Bank? Is it UNWT? Is it the UN? You know, like, where do we go to take this forward? Because I just feel like we're in a bit of a difficult place where you either have the money up front, and I see lots of people saying, well, I want to study or I want to train to be this. Where do I get a loan? I don't see that system in place where even people will necessarily be able to loan. It's like, pay me your money first to get on the course in the first place. So really, I wanted to see whether anybody in the panel would like to kind of contribute to that, about who is it that should be actually driving this? Nuga talked a little bit about individual governments, but if I'm from a country that doesn't have a national carrier or a strong aviation, I'm automatically at a disadvantage to somebody that's in Ethiopia or Kenya or South Africa. So would anybody in the panel like to sort of take that one? And it's a bit of a hot potato, I understand that. Anyone?
I think our silence says it all.
Yeah, we've addressed this numerous times, and yeah, I think we keep going around the same answer when it comes to this. I don't think there's an easy answer, to be honest, you know, but it has to be a multi-stakeholder approach. You know, everyone has a role to play, because everyone benefits at the end of the line. You know, our governments still benefit from having a better skilled workforce. The airlines benefit because they're getting the best talent that they can possibly get, and whoever else is involved. So I think when it comes to developing human capital, everyone really has to just play their part.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that is the challenge that I think, and I'm talking for myself, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong, from Dozie and Derek's perspective as having a platform, is it's very hard to get an audience with the people who make the policy. So, you know, we would love the people who make those policies to be on this, to listen to the next generation, to understand their frustrations and their challenges. How do we have an audience with the people who make those decisions?
We'd love to have them answering this question, in fact, right now. It would be amazing. Yeah.
There's a disconnect. I think we know that. And I'm sure we're not the only industry, but if the people who make the policies can't hear us, how will they ever understand what it is that we're trying to say? And you know, I think that.
And John, to even go back to the question that you asked, what role are we playing? You know, we are just the foot soldiers. We are largely doing advocacy. We're bringing people together to, you know, to find whatever solutions that we can find as far as we can, you know, but at the end of the day, we're not the people in power and authority. And we don't hold those keys. We can't enact the policies that can actually make the fundamental changes when it comes to this at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perhaps we should have an interaction with the stakeholders, the financiers, the banks, those that give the loans, the airlines themselves. We should have perhaps a meeting, perhaps whether it's online or offline, to discuss with them. They need to be part of the discussion, and not just the aviator and aspiring aviator. The policymakers, the politicians, government officials, stakeholders, they all have to be part of this interaction. Perhaps we should have a webinar, perhaps an offline meeting with them, so we can hear their part of the story.
I don't disagree with that. I think the challenge that we find, all of us, is getting them to agree to it, I think. And we have tried in terms of getting people around the table. You know, that's what we try to do. But yes, we should keep trying. We've got to keep knocking on the door, Dozie. Otherwise, we're just preaching to the choir, aren't we? You know, we need to make them accountable and not just listen, but then say, this is what we're going to do as a result of what we're hearing. Because the big challenge, and a lot of this comes back to what's been talked about, is we have this situation where, look at what's happened in the USA. The industry has ramped up and it can't cope because the pilots are they need to get retrained. They need to get in. Now, African aviation was in the doldrums. It was losing money pre-COVID. It's really bad. You know, obviously it's been hit very badly, but for it to recover, we need trained people. And it's an incredible skill at a pilot level, at a flight operations level. It takes time. Haig, Amanda, they've told you about this. Nuga understands it. Most of our audience, you know, you're aware of the process. We can't turn the taps back on and expect a load of people to be able to fly the aircraft around Africa. And imagine if we're sat here in a year or two saying, the reason African aviation hasn't restarted or been able to recover is simply lack of human capital, when we've got all these people on the webinar and in your Facebook group saying, I want to be a pilot, I want to be a pilot, but we never facilitated it. And that will be, we will look back on this and say, what a crazy world, what a crazy situation. But it takes a very brave person right now to say, I'm going to put my flag in the sand. I think we all know that aviation's recovering and will recover. And it's the only way to connect Africa anyway, for all of the geographic and socioeconomic reasons that we've got. So, you know, that's me on my, from my experience, but I'm a non-African coming into this, and it's kind of an objective view of what I see being the issues. And I'm sure they're not limited just to Africa. You know, we've had some great comments on the chat. I'm looking through the Q&A, and I think a lot of the questions have been answered. I don't know whether anybody else on the panel, we're going to go and do the quiz in 5 minutes. But if anybody else on the panel wants to say something, we will come back for wrap up after the quiz. But yeah, please, Dozie.
I have a very important question. Actually, it's a recurrent question, which occurs almost everywhere in the group, on social media, on Twitter, every platform. The question of age. As someone said this just this morning, I got this just this morning. It's about those who are like, if you're 30 years, 35 years, or 40 years old, what are your chances? I think I will have to direct this question to Captain Haig. If you're above 30, 35, 40, what are your chances of going into a flight school and becoming a successful pilot? What's your honest opinion to advise to those who are above 30 and 35, who want to pursue career in the aviation industry as pilots?
I think, and from our marathon history, they say no human is limited. I think we all have equal opportunities for getting into aviation. For whatever reasons we are getting into aviation, be it delayed passion or, for me, it really doesn't matter. I've seen people who are 40 come into aviation very late and they're enjoying it. So really, the age factor does not necessarily feature here. However, we do see that sometimes statistically, the older people will sometimes take some time because they've been doing a lot of other things and they've formed strong opinions on a lot of things. If I give you an example, an 18-year-old, you tell them that this phone is red, and they'll believe it's red. And it's very easy to train someone who's younger. They're more acceptable to learning. So it's really, but age, I don't think it should be a hindrance to anyone.
Right.
Yeah, just a quick one, actually, before we go to the quiz. Can I ask a question to Amanda? Because obviously, Amanda, you're a trailblazer in your own right as a woman, the first to do a few things in South Africa, and even from a racial point of view and your agenda. Yeah, so how can we get, and when I look at the aspiring aviators, even in the audience, I'm sure there's more male than female. How can we get more women to pick interest in aviation or to even get into the aviation industry from your point of view?
I think it falls on everyone, because it falls on everybody to not have gender bias. I think everybody from parents to friends to people in and outside the industry play a huge role in this, because we are all a product of our circumstances, we're all a product of how we grew up. So my family, my culture, my religion, the people in my community play a role in how I perceive the world. So if we live in a world that limits girls and limits girls' capabilities, there's always going to be that disparity, because girls will grow up feeling as though, but being a pilot is a job's career, or it is a boy's career. So I think the onus falls on everybody to make girls feel like they can be anything they want to be, regardless of prehistorically what it's been before. Because yes, we grew up in a world where predominantly this is what males do, but the tide is turning, it's a new day now. And I think it falls on everyone to just make girls feel as though they can do this too, and it's not a gender specific career, because the plane definitely doesn't know I'm female. So that shouldn't be a hindrance at all.
Nice one. It's a new day. Over to you, John.
Fantastic. What a great answer. The plane doesn't know I'm female. That's amazing. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, guys.